But yeah, Lucid Games based in Liverpool. I can't tell you anything that I've worked on yet because it's all secret. But you know, my colleagues have worked on some good stuff, so that's there. So when you look up what a technical artist is, usually it'll say something along the lines of a technical artist is a bridge between artists and programmers, which is true, but probably not that helpful because I'm not a bridge. I'm not. What is that about what I do every day that tells me any information? And so it's really confusing to try and figure out if I had the skills to do that and if I would enjoy it. So hopefully today I'm going to go through a few things that a technical artist does day to day. I've got a couple of examples and just descriptions of a few of these specialities. And yeah, so it's kind of daunting because there's a lot to being a technical artist. There's a lot of different specialities. But I personally think that's the best thing about being a technical artist because you really get to work on something different every week and it never gets boring and you're always learning new things. So one of the things is being a tools programmer. Now in some companies, especially bigger companies, this will be its own job title, tools programmer. But in smaller companies or companies like Lucid, where I work, it's just part of a technical artist job or sometimes a programmer who just enjoys that a little bit more. So if you want to be a tools programmer, you probably want to be a bit more on the technical side. You will be doing some programming, but it's good to know about the art side as well because you will be making tools for artists or designers or animators and you really just want to help make their job as smooth as possible. So one of the things you might do in this is if an artist is always pressing the same options to export a file, you can bundle those options into one button and that stops them making any little mistakes and it also just makes their job a little bit quicker and a little bit less annoying basically and they'll love you for it. So that's really fun if you enjoy programming but want to work with artists a bit more. So then there's also pipeline and workflow development, which is pretty similar to tools because it's quite technical as well. And this is basically the pipeline is where a game becomes a game. Without the pipeline, you can't bring all your assets together into the game engine. You can't make your games, you can't make your characters move, you can't bring in the game's code. You need to all work as a team to bring it all together. And as a technical artist, you would be in a unique position of understanding what each member of the team needs and how their workflow needs to work within the team. Okay, so then it's shaders. I have got an example. I'll see if I can bring it up. 1 second. Sorry. This one. Okay, so shaders is basically taking materials and making them a bit more dynamic, a bit more complex. So this is a shader that I made a while ago for water. You can kind of see changing the options and stuff and making it as dynamic as possible. And sometimes as a technical artist, you have to make tools and shaders that give the control over to an artist, or even so that when your game director comes over and says, actually, I don't quite like that shade of blue, you just be like, no problem, and change it on the spot and they'll love that. So this can be done in a node-based system, like in UE4, or it might be done in a high-level shader language. So as you know, I used to be a programmer, so I can do graphics programming, but it's a little bit more fun to do it in a node-based system sometimes. So don't worry if you can't program shaders from scratch. It's fine to do it in a node-based system as well. And just because you're on a technical side as well, doesn't mean you can't make things pretty, because that's always fun to do. Cool, and then go back to my slide. Cool. So another area is visual effects, which is my favourite. So this involves making rain, explosions, fire, and just fun, magic, sparkly, fun things. And it's great because you can go home and you can be like, for my job, I made something explode. And that's always fun. So this is either doing like realistic effects, maybe in Houdini or in Maya, or it could be using the in-engine tools to create real-time effects. So in UE4, you have, so now it's the Niagara system that's coming in, and you need to be able to balance the creative side of this, but also the technical side, and make sure that you're not having a negative hit on performance. Cool. I think I'm going a little bit fast, so I'll try and slow down a little bit. Cool. So then there's also things like procedural materials, which is another side of technical art. And sometimes environment artists or character artists make their own procedural materials. And sometimes they let the technical artists go ahead and do this for them. And it basically means that you can have your materials and you can change them on the whim, and you don't in a non-destructive way. So you can have multiple versions of the same material, and you can make loads of different copies and all have slight different values. And it means that your workflow becomes a lot smoother and quicker, and you can make a lot more things a lot quicker. You've probably all used procedural materials because you've all probably used things like Substance Designer before. I know that Staffordshire teaches Substance Designer, so that's pretty cool. And then things like procedural modelling. This is not used that much at the moment in games, but I think it's starting to become a bigger area. So if you can, try and have a look at procedural modelling. So what this is usually in software such as Houdini, you can make one Houdini asset that can make multiple of a game asset. So for example, you could make an entire street of houses with only one asset, and each house can look slightly different. Now, when you start to do that and you use procedural materials on that as well, you can create entire open worlds with very few resources and very few artists. And so I really think that more games are going to start using this, especially with outsourcing of assets becoming a thing. If the individual assets might be outsourced, but the procedural modelling is probably going to be done in-house and be bespoke to that game. And it's a very interesting area to look at. Cool. So then there's things like user interfaces, which I think some people don't realise can also be a part of technical art, because you'll be working with a graphics artist or a user interface designer and taking that interface and making it functional. So you need to be able to understand the code that is needed behind the interface, but you also need to balance that and make sure that it still looks good. So again, you need both sides of technical and art. And again, this does require some scripting or programming knowledge, but not too much in depth. So if you're not a fan of maths, this is a good one to look at. And finally, animation and rigging. Again, I've got a video. So. Sorry. Okay. I didn't actually make this one, but I borrowed it from my sister when she was doing tools for animation. So as part of a technical artist's job, you need to be able to help the animators do their job, basically. So that involves rigging characters or game models so that they can be used in the game and actually move. And it also involves being able to put in those assets with the animations into a game engine. So things like this tool work really well because it's not that complex, but it can speed up an artist or animator's workflow just 10 times. So most of this is just, I'll skip ahead a little bit. So this tool is basically just helping the animator and rigger be able to select the different points just by using these nodes. So again, and then it's going to bring up another thing. So that there you go. So again, this has made a little interface for an animator or for someone who's working on a rig, so that they can select each of the control points quite easily. Again, it's not a huge tool, but it's just a little thing that just makes their job a little bit easier. And it means that less mistakes are going to be made, and they can just have a smoother workflow into getting the asset into the game. So again, you might need to know some programming for this role, but not too much. And you will be working within 3D packages or within a game engine like UE4 or Unity. But you've still got the artistic side, because you do need to work with the artists and the animators to be able to do this kind of stuff. Back to my talk. Okay. So hopefully you can kind of see the kind of things that you'd be doing every day as a technical artist. There's a lot of things there, but usually you'd pick maybe 1 or 2 things to specialize in. And basically you just want to be that person who can help other people. So you might have an artist come up to you and go, "Oh, this is really annoying. Can you make this easier for me?" And you'll look at it and you'll maybe make them a tool, maybe make them a nicer interface, and just smooth the game development process along a little bit for them. Okay. Sorry. So now I've told you a little bit about what the job is, but you might not know how to get that job. So hopefully this will tell you whether you already have the skills needed and what you need to do to put yourself in a position where you'll be able to be hired as a technical artist. So I'm sure you've all heard this before, but you all need a good portfolio. Pretty much no matter what job you're going for in games, you're going to need to show that you can do the work. And sometimes that's by working on game jams, and sometimes it's by making a really good portfolio. So your portfolio might be more on the art side, or it might be more on the technical side. It depends where you want to specialize. If you're going for a smaller studio, you want to be able to have a larger skill set, because you're going to be wearing multiple different hats. You might be doing tools one day and then shaders the next day. But you just want to make sure that you can show that you'll be useful to your team members. If someone can look at your portfolio and go, "I want them, they would make my job easier," then you're doing your job as a technical artist. So you also need to be able to work well with others, which is pretty obvious because that's true in most jobs. But it's especially important as a technical artist. And this is because you're going to be working with every single person within the game development process. You're going to be working with artists to help make them tools. You're going to be working with programmers to make sure that the game runs efficiently. And you're going to be working with designers and animators again for tools. And just every stage of the process you're going to be involved in. So you need to be able to talk to all the members of the team, and you need to be able to change the way you talk to reflect who you're talking to. There's no point talking to an artist and telling them about all the maths that's gone into your shader. They're probably not going to care. But if you show them some pretty pictures and stuff, at least this is true for me, show them some pictures and they're probably going to want to have that conversation. But if you talk to a programmer and talk to them about the different colour values, they're probably going to be like, "Okay, but does it work?" So you need to make sure that the person you're talking to can understand and relate to the thing you're trying to communicate with them about. And also, everybody just wants to work with someone that they can talk to and someone that is nice and that they can be friends with, pretty much. So No one wants to work with someone who's too egotistical, so you need to be humble and you need to be helpful, because the main role of a tech artist is just to help out your teammates. Okay. So hopefully this one's pretty self-explanatory, because technical artist, it says it in the title. You need to have a creative and a technical mindset. Now, you don't necessarily need to be able to code, but that does help. But you do need to be able to switch between having that technical mindset of, is this going to work well within a game? Is it going to affect performance? And is it going to work on consoles? Is it going to work on mobiles, depending on what your game is? But you also need to have that creative mindset. You need to make sure that what you're creating works well visually, or if you're making tools for an artist, you need to make sure that it's easy for them to use. And you need to be able to switch between the two on multiple times a day. And you'll never just be one side of the scale. You'll always be a mixture of the two. Okay. So an understanding of programming and scripting languages. So I think I said before, you don't need to be a programmer to be a technical artist, but it does help. And it really helps if you can be able to read code, even if you don't want to write it yourself. For starters, it means you have access to so many more resources. You can look at a graphics programming book and translate that into a UE4 material system or blueprint system. You might not be able to write that code from scratch, but you can read the code well enough that you can understand it and you can use it. And that, I find that really helpful. And also, if you start to look at programming, you sort of get in this logical mindset that works really well when you're troubleshooting as a technical artist, which is a big part of the job. But don't let the programming scare you off, because some areas of technical art are more arty than they are technical, and they're always pretty fun as well. Okay. So I've put learn to research. Now basically this just means use Google. And when I first started looking at getting a job as a technical artist, I actually said to someone on Twitter, okay, I can probably do this job, but I spend most of my time on Google checking like how to do stuff. And they told me it was fine, because that's what everyone does. And it's true. No matter how long you've been in the industry, you will use Google. When the internet's down, you will panic because you can't look up that algorithm and the whole office will just come to a standstill. But you need to be able to use Google in an effective way. There's no point being able to Google and just looking at the first result and saying, this isn't what I want, it's useless, I can't find it. You need to be able to search for things that you're looking for, but also things around the area. So there might be a specific problem you're trying to solve, and you might not be able to find a solution to that problem, but you might be able to find a solution to a similar problem and take that and change it and apply it to what you're working on. Now, being able to use Google in a way that you can take code, or you can take an algorithm or a solution and change it, not just copy and paste, because it's very easy to just get in the mindset of, oh, this works, I'm going to copy and paste it. But you might not learn much from doing that. And one of the great things to do when you copy and paste something is try and break it. You learn so much when you break something. So if you can take a material, a shader, or a procedural model, and you can break it and then try and fix it and figure out what it was that caused it to break and how it works, you'll learn so much. And really all you're doing is Googling stuff, but you're Googling in a way that helps you to do your job effectively. So don't be scared that if you're just spending a lot of time on Google, we all do. Just don't get distracted by the memes. Okay, so look, sometimes you just have to be talking to the right person in the right place at the right time. So I was extremely, extremely lucky to get my job. I knew people who worked at Lucid Games already, and I just happened to ask one of them for advice. And they spoke to me and gave me some advice on how I can become a tech artist. That then led me to showing them my portfolio. And then a couple of months later, they remembered that and I got offered a job because a future project needed a technical artist. So I was very lucky, but you still have to have the portfolio and the skills to work well with others. You have to have the technical mindset and the creative mindset to back up that look, but you still have to have that look. Now, you can manufacture that look. You can do things like networking. You can come to these conferences and talk to people, get advice. You can use things like Twitter. Twitter was really good for me when I was looking for a job, because people on there would sometimes say, hey, this looks like something you might be interested in. And that was always really useful to have that kind of motivation to just keep me going while I was job hunting. Because some of you will find this when you graduate. Job hunting isn't a lot of fun, but you will get there. And sometimes you just need that bit of luck and everything will change. So just hold out a little bit longer and you'll meet someone who'll just go, hey, we're looking for a technical artist, or hey, we're looking for whatever job role you want to be in. Maybe take a look at it. Cool. Okay, so this is cool. I have to go through this bit quick. So this is the final bit that I wanted to talk about. So everybody sometimes has problems with mental health, and I really wanted to make sure that I spoke about this so that people know you're not alone. It's really important that you look after yourself. Mental health is super important. And when you look after yourself, you will be better at your job, but also just life will be easier and more enjoyable. So as part of that, you don't want to overwork. Now, people in the games industry are super passionate and it's amazing, but that means we have a tendency to overwork. We do crunch, which again, Games United is probably really good for this slide, because we will do crunch and you'll be like, I enjoy it, so it's fine. But if you keep working too hard, it will affect you mentally and physically, so you need to be aware. And sometimes taking a break from the screen can really help with this. Sometimes you find your best solutions to a problem when you're not at your computer. I always find solutions when I'm in the shower, and then I'm always like, oh, I need to get out and get back on my computer. But take that time to have a break, to think things through, but also to have hobbies that don't involve video games or computers. Maybe take up board games, or I personally have started doing photography and camping. And when you do things like that, you start to find motivation and inspiration where you wouldn't expect it. And that will start to reflect in your work, especially if you're doing something that's creative. Okay, this one's important to me because failure is gonna happen. It's not an option, it will happen. And when I got my first job in the games industry, I ended up having to leave that job, and it was mostly due to my mental health. I was really struggling with anxiety and I had to leave that job. And I felt like I'd failed. I felt like I'd found my first step into the industry and I'd failed. I had to leave. I had to move back home for a little bit, and that was okay. Without that, I wouldn't be here today, because that taught me how to face my fears and how to handle my anxiety better. So when you mess up a little bit, or maybe you need to restart that project, or you make a little mistake, don't worry, because you will be able to keep going and you will be able to start that project again, and you will have learned skills that you wouldn't have learned otherwise, and you will take them and carry them on and become better at your job, and it will help you just in your personal life as well. And finally, just look after each other, because you might be fighting for the same jobs, but you all will have stuff in common, and if you can push each other and motivate each other, you'll be much happier than if you're competing with each other. So that's me. I hope that was useful. My Twitter's there if you want to follow me, or email me if you've got any questions or want to know more about technical art.
Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions? Anybody just
Awesome.
no? If not, one at the back. Hang on.
How much do you use Houdini in your work?
So at the moment, on what I'm working on, a lot, because I can't say about the project, but this project requires Houdini a lot. So basically, a lot of companies, it will depend on what your speciality is to how much you'll use things like Houdini. But if it's a realistic game and you're doing effects, then you're probably going to use something like Houdini. If you're doing procedural modelling, you're probably going to be in Houdini pretty much all day. So yeah.